The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead at the riverside rest stop, casting a harsh glow across the tired faces of travelers. It was 7:30 p.m. on a Wednesday evening in September, and Sarah Thompson sat in a corner booth, her dark fingers nervously playing with the paper wrapper from her straw. The 14-year-old's usually bright brown eyes were now dull with fear, darting between the exit doors and the white man sitting across from her who kept calling himself her father. The man, who had introduced himself to the waitress as Jim Wilson, wore a plain blue baseball cap and a brown jacket that had seen better days. His presence made Sarah's skin crawl, but she forced herself to remain still, knowing his warning about what would happen if she tried anything stupid. 36 hours had passed since he had tricked her into his truck at the Richmond Mall, promising to help find her lost phone that he claimed he'd seen someone pick up. 2 tables away, a family with young children laughed over their plates of fries and burgers. Sarah watched them with longing, remembering how just 2 days ago she had been sitting at her own dinner table with her real father, Marcus Thompson. They had been planning her upcoming birthday party, and her dad had promised to get her the new art supplies she had been eyeing at the craft store. "Eat your food, sweetheart," the man said, his voice sickly sweet, but his eyes cold and threatening. "We've got a long drive ahead of us." He pushed the plate of chicken tenders closer to her, but Sarah's stomach turned at the thought of eating. The food in front of her might as well have been cardboard. Through the large windows, Sarah could see trucks pulling in and out of the parking lot. Each set of headlights that swept across the diner gave her a glimmer of hope, only to fade away as quickly as it came. She thought about her father, a respected high school teacher, who must be going crazy with worry by now. The missing person alerts would be out. She was already 2 states away from home. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, approached their table again. "Everything okay here, sugar?" she asked, looking at Sarah with kind eyes. Sarah opened her mouth slightly, but the man quickly interrupted. "We're doing just fine, aren't we, princess?" he said, his foot under the table pressing hard against Sarah's shoe, a silent warning. "My daughter's just tired from the long drive. We're heading up to visit her grandmother." Sarah managed a weak nod, her heart pounding. She wondered if the waitress could see through the lie, could somehow sense that this man was not her father, that she needed help. But the woman just smiled sympathetically and walked away, leaving Sarah alone again with her captor. The rest stop was busy with the dinner rush. Truckers coming in for coffee, families on road trips stretching their legs, business people grabbing quick meals before continuing their journeys. Sarah watched each face that passed by, silently screaming for help in her mind. She had tried using her phone earlier, but he had taken it shortly after getting her into his truck, tossing it out the window somewhere along I-95. The man checked his watch for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. He seemed nervous, his eyes frequently scanning the parking lot through the windows. Sarah knew he was planning to leave soon, to take her somewhere else, somewhere further from home, from safety, from her real family. She thought about her best friend Madison, who had been supposed to meet her at the mall that day. If only she hadn't gone ahead alone while waiting for Madison to finish her dentist appointment. If only she hadn't believed this stranger's story about her phone. If only she had listened to her father's warnings about talking to strangers, no matter how nice or helpful they seemed. The door chimed as new customers walked in. Sarah's eyes lifted hopefully, then widened slightly as she noticed a man in casual clothes who carried himself differently from the other diners. There was something about his alert posture and watchful eyes that caught her attention. He chose a seat that gave him a clear view of the entire diner, and for the first time since her ordeal began, Sarah felt a tiny spark of hope. Little did she know that this Marine's arrival would change everything that was about to unfold at the Riverside Rest Stop. Staff Sergeant James Martinez hadn't planned to stop at the Riverside Rest Stop that evening. After a long day of training new recruits at Camp Lejeune, he had wanted to drive straight home to his family. But something, call it instinct or divine intervention, made him pull over when he saw the sign for hot coffee. The bell above the door chimed as he entered the diner. Even in civilian clothes, jeans and a gray t-shirt, Martinez carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of a Marine. 15 years of service had made situational awareness second nature to him. His dark eyes automatically scanned the room, noting exits, counting people, and looking for anything unusual. That's when he noticed them, the African-American teenage girl and the older white man sitting across from her. At first glance, they might have looked like any other father and daughter stopping for dinner. But Martinez's recent training in human trafficking awareness had taught him to look closer, to notice the small details that others might miss. The girl's body language screamed discomfort. She sat rigid in her seat, her shoulders hunched forward as if trying to make herself smaller. Her eyes kept darting around the room, looking at other diners with a desperate intensity that made Martinez's instincts kick into high alert. He chose a booth 2 tables away, positioning himself where he could observe them without being obvious. The waitress came over, and he ordered a coffee and burger, keeping his movements casual while his mind processed everything he was seeing. "You've barely touched your food, honey," the man said to the girl, his voice carrying across the quiet diner. His tone was sweet, but Martinez caught the underlying tension in it. "We need to get back on the road soon." The girl, who looked around 14 or 15, picked up her fork with trembling fingers. Martinez noticed how she winced when the man shifted in his seat, as if expecting some kind of punishment. Her eyes were red-rimmed, suggesting she had been crying recently. Martinez pulled out his phone, pretending to scroll through social media while actually taking mental notes. The man's behavior set off more red flags. He was too attentive to their surroundings, constantly checking the parking lot through the windows. His eyes followed every server, every customer who walked past their table. These were the actions of someone who knew he was doing something wrong. Then it happened, the moment that confirmed Martinez's suspicions. When the man turned to wave down their waitress, the girl quickly made a hand gesture. To most people, it might have looked like she was just fixing her hair or making a random movement. But Martinez recognized it immediately. It was the international signal for help, the same one they had learned about in their recent training session. His heart began beating faster, but years of combat experience helped him maintain his calm exterior. He watched as the girl repeated the gesture a few minutes later, more deliberately this time. One hand raised as if to wave, then folding her thumb into her palm before closing her fingers over it. The universal sign that meant, "I am in danger. I need help." Martinez's mind raced through his options. Direct confrontation could put the girl in more danger if the man panicked. He needed to be smart about this. The Marine pulled up his phone's messaging app, careful to keep his movements natural and unhurried. First, he sent a text to the local police department's emergency number, which he'd looked up as soon as he sat down. Then, he quietly spoke to his waitress when she brought his coffee, showing her his Marine ID and explaining his concerns in a low voice. The waitress, Linda, according to her name tag, nodded discreetly. "I thought something wasn't right with those two," she whispered. "The girl seems terrified of him." "Keep serving them normally," Martinez instructed softly. "We don't want him to suspect anything. I've already contacted the authorities." As he watched the man check his watch again and signal for their bill, Martinez felt the familiar calm of pre-mission focus settle over him. He had been in combat zones, faced dangerous situations, but somehow this felt different. This wasn't about following orders or completing a mission. It was about saving a frightened young girl who had found the courage to ask for help. The next few minutes would be crucial, and Staff Sergeant James Martinez was ready for whatever might happen. The clock on the diner wall ticked to 8:15 p.m. as Sarah watched the man she now knew as Jim get up to pay their bill. Her heart pounded so hard she thought everyone in the restaurant must hear it. The brief moments when he stepped away from the table felt like her first breath of air after being underwater too long. 20 feet away, Staff Sergeant Martinez noticed how the girl's shoulders relaxed slightly the moment her captor walked to the counter. He kept his eyes on his phone, but his attention never left the scene unfolding before him. Through the reflection in the window, he could see everything at the payment counter while appearing to mind his own business. Sarah's hands shook as she quickly reached for her water glass. This time, she made the distress signal more deliberately, praying someone would understand. She traced the gesture twice, thumb tucked into her palm, fingers closing over it. Her eyes met Martinez's for just a split second in the window reflection, and she saw him give a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. The Marine's mind raced through his training. He had already texted the local police, who confirmed they were 7 minutes away. The truck stop's security guard, a former Army veteran named Mike, was positioned near the entrance after Martinez's quiet alert. Now they just needed to keep the suspect inside for a few more minutes. Linda, the waitress, played her part perfectly. She deliberately slowed down at the register, having trouble with the credit card machine. "Oh dear, the system seems to be running slow tonight," she said apologetically to Jim. Sometimes it takes a few tries. Would you mind swiping again? Jim shifted his weight impatiently, his eyes darting between the front door and Sarah. Just hurry up, he muttered, his friendly facade starting to crack. Martinez noticed how the man's hand kept touching the right side of his jacket, possibly checking for a weapon. Sarah used these precious moments to make eye contact with Martinez through the window reflection again. She mouthed two words that made his blood run cold. Help me. The tears gathering in her eyes told him everything he needed to know about the urgency of the situation. Martinez texted the security guard. Suspect possibly armed, right side of jacket. Girl confirmed in distress. Police 4 mins out. He then moved his coffee cup to the edge of the table. Their agreed signal that things might turn dangerous. The diner had mostly emptied out now, with only a few truckers at the counter and an elderly couple near the door. Martinez silently thanked his years of training that taught him to create impromptu teams in crisis situations. Everyone he had quietly alerted was playing their part perfectly. Linda was still stalling at the register. Let me try another machine, she said, moving to a different register. Sometimes this one works better. Jim's patience was clearly wearing thin. Look, just let me pay cash, he snapped, reaching for his wallet. The friendly father act was slipping, revealing glimpses of his true nature. Sarah could sense his growing agitation. She had seen this side of him during the terrifying drive, when he thought she wasn't being cooperative enough. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, leaving sweaty prints on the laminate surface. Through the front windows, Martinez spotted the first signs of approaching help. 2 unmarked police cars pulling quietly into the far end of the parking lot. They were positioning themselves to block the exits. Now they just needed to keep Jim inside for 2 more minutes. The security guard casually walked past their table, appearing to head to the restroom. As he passed Sarah, he quietly said, "You're safe now, kid. Just stay calm for a few more minutes." His words were barely a whisper, but Sarah felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. Jim finally managed to pay, crumpling the receipt in his fist as he turned back toward their table. His face had lost its fake cheerfulness, replaced by a tense, angry expression that made Sarah shrink back in her seat. Martinez watched as the man's eyes darted around the diner, perhaps finally sensing that something wasn't right. The next few moments would determine everything. Martinez slowly stood up, positioning himself to intercept if the man tried to grab the girl and run. The security guard emerged from the hallway, locking the back exit. Through the windows, more police cars were visible in the parking lot. The trap was set. Now they just had to spring it without anyone getting hurt. Time seemed to slow down in the Riverside rest stop as Staff Sergeant Martinez watched Jim return to the table. The Marine could read the growing panic in the man's movements, the way his eyes darted between exits, how his hands clenched and unclenched, the sweat beginning to show on his forehead. "Come on, sweetie, time to go," Jim said to Sarah, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. He grabbed her backpack from the booth, his movements becoming more aggressive. Several other diners had noticed the tension now, and the room grew quieter. Martinez moved with careful precision, adjusting his position to stand near the coffee counter. His phone buzzed silently in his pocket, a text from the police outside. In position. Multiple units ready. Await signal. The security guard, Mike, had positioned himself near the restroom hallway, appearing casual while blocking that escape route. Sarah's hands trembled as she slowly stood up. She knew something was about to happen, but fear kept her frozen, afraid that any wrong move might make Jim violent. She had seen his temper during the drive when she had tried to wave at a passing car. The bruise on her arm was still fresh from that incident. "Actually, sir," Linda the waitress called out, "there seems to be a problem with your payment. Could you come back to the register for a moment?" She was following Martinez's instructions perfectly, creating another delay. Jim's face darkened. "I paid. We're leaving," he snapped, grabbing Sarah's arm. The girl winced in pain, and that was all Martinez needed to see. "Let her go," Martinez said calmly but firmly, stepping forward. His voice carried the authority of 15 years in the Marine Corps. "It's over. The building is surrounded." For a split second, nobody moved. Then everything happened at once. Jim yanked Sarah closer, reaching for his jacket pocket. Martinez moved with the speed and precision of his military training, covering the distance between them in 2 quick steps. "Don't," The security guard shouted, drawing his taser. The remaining customers scrambled away from the scene, some running toward the exits where police were now streaming in, their weapons drawn. Martinez kept his focus entirely on Jim and Sarah. "Think about your next move very carefully," he said, his voice steady. "There are 24 officers outside. You got nowhere to go. Let the girl go, and we can end this peacefully." Sarah's eyes were wide with terror as Jim's grip on her arm tightened. She could see police officers through the windows, their cars' lights flashing in the parking lot. Freedom was so close, yet she had never felt more scared. "You don't understand," Jim snarled, his free hand still hovering near his jacket. "She's my daughter. This is a family matter." "We both know that's not true," Martinez replied, taking another careful step forward. He could see Sarah shaking, but there was also a glimmer of hope in her eyes now. Her real father is Marcus Thompson, a teacher in Richmond. She was kidnapped from the mall 36 hours ago. We know everything. Jim's eyes widened at the mention of these details. His grip on Sarah loosened just slightly, but it was enough. Martinez gave a subtle hand signal, and the security guard moved in from behind, while 2 police officers approached from the side. "Last chance," Martinez said firmly. "Let her go now, and you walk out of here in handcuffs. Make the wrong choice, and this ends much worse for you." Sarah felt Jim's fingers loosen further on her arm. In that split second, she remembered the self-defense move her dad had taught her: twist, duck, and run. Without thinking, she acted. She yanked her arm down and away while ducking under his grip. Martinez moved instantly. As Sarah broke free, he stepped between her and Jim, while the security guard and police officers rushed forward. Jim reached for his pocket, but before he could pull out whatever weapon he had hidden, 3 officers tackled him to the ground. "I got you," Martinez said softly to Sarah, who was shaking uncontrollably now. He guided her quickly away from the scene as more officers swarmed in to secure Jim. Linda rushed forward with a blanket, wrapping it around Sarah's shoulders, while the young girl finally broke down in tears of relief. The entire takedown had lasted less than 30 seconds, but to everyone involved, it felt like hours. Outside, more police cars arrived, their lights painting the parking lot in flashes of red and blue. The nightmare was finally ending. The next hour at the Riverside rest stop was a blur of activity. Police officers secured the scene while Sarah sat in a quiet corner of the diner, still wrapped in the blanket Linda had given her. Staff Sergeant Martinez stayed close by, his calm presence helping her feel safe for the first time in 2 days. "Would you like some hot chocolate?" Linda asked gently, setting a steaming mug in front of Sarah. The girl nodded, her hands still shaking slightly as she reached for the cup. The sweetness of the drink helped calm her nerves as she watched the police processing the scene. Jim, whose real name they learned was Richard Keene, sat handcuffed in a police car outside. Through the diner's windows, Sarah could see him arguing with the officers. His fake friendly father act had completely disappeared, replaced by anger and desperation. "You did really well back there," Martinez said softly, sitting across from Sarah but giving her plenty of space. "That signal you made, the one tucking your thumb into your palm, that's what caught my attention. Where did you learn it?" Sarah took another sip of hot chocolate before answering. "TikTok," she said quietly. "There was a video about safety signals that went viral a few months ago. I didn't think I'd ever need to use it." Her voice cracked slightly at the end. A female police officer named Detective Lisa Chen approached their table, carrying a notebook. "Sarah, I know you're tired, but we need to ask you a few questions while everything is still fresh in your mind. Is that okay?" Her voice was gentle but professional. Sarah nodded, unconsciously moving closer to Martinez. The Marine's protective presence made her feel stronger. "Can he stay?" she asked Detective Chen, glancing at Martinez. "Of course," the detective smiled, pulling up a chair. "Staff Sergeant Martinez is a hero. We've been looking for you since you were reported missing yesterday morning. Can you tell me how this all started?" Taking a deep breath, Sarah began to tell her story. She described how she had been at the Richmond Mall, waiting for her friend Madison, how Keene had approached her, claiming he'd seen someone pick up her phone, how he'd seemed so normal and helpful at first, offering to help her look for it in the parking lot. "He said he saw the person go this way," Sarah continued, her voice getting softer. "When we got to his truck, he grabbed me and pushed me inside. He had a knife. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks as she remembered the terror of that moment. Detective Chen took notes while Sarah spoke, occasionally asking gentle questions for clarification. Martinez noticed how the girl's hands would start shaking when she described particularly frightening moments, and he would quietly push the hot chocolate closer to her, giving her a reason to pause and collect herself. Outside, more police cars arrived. One officer was taking photographs of Keen's truck, while others searched through its contents. Through the window, Sarah could see them pulling out various items and placing them in evidence bags. "You said he mentioned other girls," Detective Chen prompted carefully. "Can you remember what he said about them?" Sarah nodded slowly. He talked in his sleep during the drive. He mentioned names: Ashley and Rebecca. He said something about taking them to Pennsylvania. Her voice trembled slightly. The detective and Martinez exchanged significant looks. This information could help with other missing persons cases. Keen wasn't just a kidnapper. He might be connected to a larger trafficking operation. As Sarah continued answering questions, more details of her ordeal emerged. She described how Keen had taken back roads to avoid major highways, how he had forced her to call him Dad whenever they stopped for food or bathroom breaks, how he had threatened her family if she tried to run. "The worst part," Sarah said, wiping her eyes with a napkin Linda had brought, "was thinking about my dad. He must have been so worried." Fresh tears spilled over as she thought about her father. "He's on his way," Detective Chen assured her. "We called him as soon as we confirmed it was you. He should be here in about an hour." For the first time that evening, Sarah smiled slightly. The nightmare was almost over. She looked at Martinez, who had helped save her, then at Linda, who had played her part in the rescue, and finally at Detective Chen, who was still taking notes. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Thank you all for helping me." The parking lot of the Riverside rest stop was now filled with police vehicles, their red and blue lights reflecting off the wet pavement from an earlier rain. Richard Keen sat in the back of a police car, his true identity now revealed through fingerprint scanning. The officers had discovered he was wanted in 3 other states for similar crimes. Inside the diner, Detective Chen's radio crackled to life. "Be advised, Mr. Thompson is 20 minutes out," the dispatcher announced. Sarah's heart leaped at the mention of her father. She had moved to a more comfortable booth, still wrapped in her blanket, with Staff Sergeant Martinez keeping a protective watch nearby. "Sarah," Detective Chen said gently, "there's something you should know about Richard Keen." The detective pulled up a photo on her tablet. "We need you to look at this. These are 2 other girls who went missing in similar circumstances. Do you recognize them from anywhere?" Sarah's hands trembled as she looked at the pictures of 2 teenagers, both around her age. "Yes," she whispered. "He had their photos in his truck. I saw them when he made me get something from the glove compartment. He called them his other daughters." The information Sarah provided was proving invaluable. With each detail she remembered, the police were putting together a bigger picture of Keen's criminal activities. They learned about safe houses he had mentioned, names he had used, and places he had planned to go. Linda, who had refused to leave until Sarah was reunited with her father, brought over more hot chocolate and a plate of warm cookies. "You need to keep your strength up, honey," she said kindly, patting Sarah's shoulder. The waitress had already given her statement to the police about how she had noticed something wrong and helped stall Keen at the register. Outside, more investigators arrived. They were carefully processing Keen's truck, photographing everything and collecting evidence. One officer emerged with a box of fake IDs and altered birth certificates. Another found a hidden compartment containing multiple prepaid phones. "You've helped us crack open a much bigger case," Detective Chen explained to Sarah. "The information you've given us might help find other missing girls." The detective's phone buzzed with updates from other police departments who were already acting on Sarah's information. Martinez, who had been quietly observing, noticed Sarah starting to look overwhelmed by all the activity. "Maybe we should take a break," he suggested to Detective Chen. "Let her rest until her father arrives." The detective agreed, closing her notebook. "You've done more than enough, Sarah. We can continue this later if we need to." She smiled warmly at the tired teenager. "You're very brave, you know that?" Sarah managed a small smile in return. The past few hours felt like a blur, from the terrifying moment when Keen had tried to force her to leave the diner, to Martinez's intervention, to the police takedown. Now, finally, she was safe, and her dad was on his way. Suddenly, there was movement at the diner's entrance. A man burst through the door, his clothes disheveled and his eyes frantically searching the room. "Sarah," he called out. "Sarah." "Daddy." Sarah's voice broke as she jumped up from the booth. Marcus Thompson ran to his daughter, wrapping her in his arms as they both broke down in tears. He held her tightly, as if afraid she might disappear again if he let go. "My baby girl," he sobbed, kissing the top of her head repeatedly. "I was so scared. I've been driving for hours, searching everywhere." His voice cracked with emotion as he held his daughter's face in his hands, looking at her as if to make sure she was really there. Martinez watched the reunion from a distance, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. This was why he had joined the Marines, to protect people, to make a difference. Linda wiped tears from her eyes as she watched father and daughter reunite, while Detective Chen smiled at the scene before her. "Thank you," Marcus said, looking up at the group of people who had helped save his daughter. "Thank you all so much." He was still holding Sarah close, his arms protective around her shoulders. "Staff Sergeant Martinez recognized my signal," Sarah told her father, pointing to the Marine. "He saved me, Dad. He and Linda and the police. They'd all helped save me." Marcus Thompson reached out to shake Martinez's hand, too overwhelmed with emotion to speak. The Marine nodded in understanding, no words necessary between them. Outside, Keene was being transferred to a more secure vehicle for transport to the county jail. His reign of terror was over, thanks to a brave girl's signal, a Marine's training, and a community of people who refused to look the other way. The fluorescent lights of the police station cast a gentle glow across the interview room, where Sarah Thompson sat beside her father, Marcus. It was almost midnight now, 3 hours after the rescue at the Riverside rest stop. The initial statements had been taken, and Detective Chen was finishing up the last of the necessary paperwork. "Just a few more signatures, Mr. Thompson," Detective Chen said kindly, sliding some forms across the desk. Marcus hadn't let go of Sarah's hand since their reunion at the diner. Even now, as he signed the papers, his other hand remained firmly clasped around his daughter's. Sarah looked different now. The police station had provided her with clean clothes, a soft gray sweatshirt with the department logo and comfortable sweatpants. A female officer had helped her wash her face and arrange her curly hair into a neat ponytail. The physical transformation was remarkable, but the emotional healing would take much longer. "The department has arranged for a trauma counselor to meet with you tomorrow," Detective Chen explained, her voice gentle. "Dr. Maria Santos is one of the best in handling cases like this. She'll help you process everything that's happened." Marcus nodded, pulling Sarah closer. "Thank you," he said, his voice still rough with emotion. I can't believe we got her back. When I saw her empty bedroom yesterday morning." His voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The door opened quietly, and Staff Sergeant Martinez stepped in. He had stayed at the station to complete his own statement and help with the investigation. Sarah's face lit up when she saw him. The Marine had become a symbol of safety for her. "I just wanted to check in before heading home," Martinez said, standing respectfully by the door. "The FBI is here. They're very interested in the information Sarah provided about the other girls. There are already teams heading to the locations she mentioned." Sarah straightened up slightly, feeling a small surge of pride. Her information might help save other girls from experiencing what she had gone through. The detective had explained how her detailed descriptions of places Keene had mentioned in his sleep could help track down his trafficking network. Linda, the waitress from the diner, had also given her statement and gone home, but not before leaving her phone number with Sarah's father. "If you ever need anything," she had said, hugging Sarah goodbye, "you call me, day or night." The simple kindness had brought fresh tears to Sarah's eyes. "We've already located one of the safe houses Sarah described," Detective Chen shared, organizing her files. "A team in Pennsylvania is searching it right now. They found evidence that other girls were held there recently." Marcus pulled out his phone, showing Sarah the hundreds of messages from family and friends. Her best friend Madison had been organizing search parties back in Richmond. Her teachers, neighbors, and even people they didn't know had been looking for her. The whole community came together, Marcus explained, scrolling through the messages. "When you disappeared, it felt like the whole city was searching. People put up posters, shared your photo online, organized search groups." His voice cracked again. No one gave up hope. Sarah leaned against her father's shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up with her. The events of the past 36 hours played through her mind. The terror of being taken, the long hours in the truck, the fear at every stop. But she also remembered the moment she decided to make the distress signal, hoping someone would recognize it. "Staff Sergeant Martinez," she said quietly, looking up at the Marine. "How did you know what my signal meant?" Martinez moved closer, taking a seat across from them. "We had a training session last week about human trafficking awareness," he explained. "They taught us about different distress signals, including the one you used. But Sarah, you're the real hero here. You stayed calm, waited for the right moment, and had the courage to ask for help." Detective Chen nodded in agreement. "That signal has helped save several people this year alone. More and more people are learning about it, which makes it harder for traffickers to operate." A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of Sarah's mother, who had been driving from her nursing shift in a different city. The room filled with fresh tears and embraces as the family reunited completely. Martinez quietly stood to leave, giving the family their privacy. But before he could reach the door, Sarah called out, "Will you come visit sometime, please?" The Marine turned back, smiling warmly. "Of course, Sarah. You're part of the Marine family now. We take care of our own." For the first time since her ordeal began, Sarah felt completely safe, surrounded by her parents' love and protected by the new friends who had become her heroes. 1 month had passed since the dramatic rescue at the Riverside Rest Stop. The autumn leaves were falling outside the Richmond Community Center, where a special ceremony was about to take place. The large meeting room was filled with people, police officers, community members, and families who had gathered for an important presentation. Sarah Thompson sat in the front row between her parents. Wearing a new blue dress her mother had bought for the occasion, she looked different now, stronger, more confident. Weekly sessions with Dr. Santos had helped her process the trauma, and the constant support of her family and new friends had aided in her recovery. At the podium, Police Chief Williams addressed the crowd. "Today, we're here to recognize extraordinary courage, both from a young survivor and from those who helped save her." He gestured toward Sarah, and then to Staff Sergeant Martinez, who sat in his formal Marine uniform a few rows back. The investigation following Sarah's rescue had led to major breakthroughs. Richard Keene's arrest had helped authorities uncover a trafficking network operating across 5 states. Because of Sarah's detailed information, 2 other missing girls, Ashley Parker and Rebecca Martinez, had been rescued from a location in Pennsylvania. Linda, the waitress from the rest stop, sat with her family in the audience. She had become a regular visitor to the Thompson home, and Sarah now called her Aunt Linda. The simple act of noticing something wrong and helping to stall Keene had made her part of this larger story of rescue and recovery. Sarah Thompson, Chief Williams continued, showed remarkable courage and presence of mind when she used the distress signal she had learned from social media. Her actions not only saved herself but led to the rescue of other victims and the dismantling of a dangerous criminal organization. Sarah squeezed her father's hand as she walked to the podium to receive a special civilian commendation. The audience applauded, and she could see her best friend Madison crying happy tears in the third row. "I just want to say something." Sarah spoke into the microphone, her voice clear and steady. "To any other girls out there who might be scared or in danger, don't give up. There are people who will help you. Learn the signals, trust your instincts, and know that you're not alone." Next, Staff Sergeant Martinez was called forward. The Marine Corps had awarded him a commendation for his actions that night, and the local police department was also honoring him. But the greatest reward, he had told Sarah, was seeing her recover and thrive. "The real hero here is Sarah," Martinez said during his brief speech. "My training helped me recognize the signal, but her courage made everything possible. She's inspired the Marine Corps to increase our trafficking awareness training, and her story has already helped save more lives." After the ceremony, people gathered for refreshments. Sarah watched as Ashley and Rebecca's families came to thank her. Both girls were also in therapy, working through their trauma, but their mothers said they were getting stronger every day. The 3 girls had formed a special bond, supporting each other through their recovery. Detective Chen arrived with more good news. Keene took a plea deal. She told the Thompson family quietly. He's facing 30 years in prison, and he's giving information about other traffickers. None of them will hurt any more families. Sarah's school had started a safety awareness club, with Sarah as an honorary member. They were teaching other students about distress signals, online safety, and the importance of trusting their instincts. The club had already spread to 3 other local high schools. "You started a movement," Martinez told Sarah as they shared cake after the ceremony. He still checked on her regularly, true to his promise about Marine family looking after their own. "Your story is making real changes in how we protect young people." As the evening wound down, Sarah looked around the room at all the people who had become part of her extended family. Martinez in his crisp uniform, Linda wiping happy tears from her eyes, Detective Chen chatting with her parents, Madison and her other school friends wearing matching safety club t-shirts. "Dad," she said softly, hugging her father, "I think I want to be a counselor when I grow up. Like Dr. Santos, I want to help other kids who've been through scary things." Marcus Thompson kissed his daughter's forehead, his eyes shining with pride. "You already are helping, baby girl, you already are." The story of the black girl with the white dad at the rest stop had become more than just a rescue tale. It had grown into a movement of awareness, education, and hope. Sarah's courage had not only saved her own life but had created ripples of change that would help protect others for years to come. And somewhere out there, other scared children were learning the same signal that had saved Sarah's life, knowing that help would come if they were brave enough to ask for it.